And as my colleague from York West said, that we're supporting this particular piece of legislation and Helping Families in Need Act. It's a kind of legislation that you'd be inclined to support, just the title of the act itself. Obviously, as my colleague said, it's a step in the right direction, but there is so much more that can be done. This particular piece of legislation modifies the Canada Labour Code to enable employees to take leave if their child is critically ill, dies, or is missing as a result of a criminal act. In addition, Bill C-44 makes substantive changes to the Employment Insurance Act to allow ill claimants receiving parental benefits to also access sick benefits. And finally, this bill introduces a grant of $350 per week to parents who earn a minimum of $6,500 annually and are forced to take leave from their employment because caring for an ill child or the child was murdered or missing. Now, none of us would ever want to be in this particular position. And as my colleague from Cape Breton and Canso said, there's so much more that can be done. But what we're trying to do here is to show the government, to convince the government that working together, we really can make a difference. And we can do so much more with a bill like C-44. Overall, as we said, it's a step in the right direction. It's badly needed. It's gone on for too long, but it can be improved. And Mr. Speaker, this is what I want to speak to, because the government can and must do more to ensure that parents whose children suffer from critical illness or tragic death or disappearance receive financial flexibility during extremely difficult times. Bill C-44 legislates two tiers of tragedy by enforcing different supports depending on the unfortunate circumstance. If a parent takes leave from work to care for a dying child, they are guaranteed up to 37 weeks of off work under the amendments to the Canadian Labour Code. But if a parent takes leave because their child is missing, they get 52 weeks off work. Now, while away from work, a parent is able to receive $350 per week. It's impossible to even imagine the pain, the fear that a parent in any of these tragic circumstances will be forced to endure. As I said when I started, I can't even put myself in the place of a parent who find themselves in such circumstances. I most certainly support the 52 weeks guaranteed for parents of a missing or murdered child, and I'm sure we all do. But I believe that parents who are caring for a critically ill child who is suffering from many of the same uncertainties and should therefore also be permitted 52 weeks instead of only 37 weeks as would be permitted under this particular piece of legislation. Let me be clear again. I agree with the intent of this bill, but I believe that the supports must be stronger and more equal. That is why Liberals introduced amendments at the committee stage that would improve and strengthen the supports that Bill C-44 provides. Unfortunately, the committee, as we all know, is comprised of a majority of Conservative members. They voted these measures down. Sadly, it appears that some on the committee could not rise above petty partisanship to deliver for Canadian families. In spite of the lack of cooperation that we found on the committee, that my colleague, again from Cape Breton, Canso, can reference, we support this bill. While I welcome the specific improvements this legislation makes to the EI system for Canadian families, Bill C-44 is part of a larger conversation about the EI system and its failure to meet the needs of Canadians. For many Canadians, the EI system provides supplementary benefits beyond the unfortunate case of loss of employment. For example, the EI system also provides for maternity and parental benefits to individuals who are pregnant, have recently given birth, are adopting a child, or are caring for a newborn. In addition, EI provides sickness benefits to individuals who are unable to work because of sickness, injury, or quarantine. Yet the question remains, and it's a question we all have to ask ourselves. Are Canadians receiving the benefits they pay for, and in some cases require, in the manner to which they need them? And I think the simple answer, Mr. Speaker, is no. And I think if you ask anyone in this House who is familiar with situations that Canadians find themselves in when they need to access EI, a program that they have paid into, that is in essence their program, then I think you would find that they're really not being treated fairly. Bill C-44 enhances benefits to those who find themselves in a very unfortunate and particular circumstance. But Bill C-44 does not solve many existing problems with the inability of the EI system to conform and adapt to the way Canadians need to use it. Although from time to time, some make it seem like the benefits provided by the EI system are gifts from the Government of Canada, the fact is, as I just said, it is a system that's paid into by Canadians. It is in fact a fund that's put in place by Canadians. And for them not to be able to access it when they need it, or in terms of the amounts that are required, I think it's a crime. It's critical, but often maligned fact. It's extremely important that as members of Parliament and representatives of our constituents that we take part in a larger conversation with Canadians about how EI benefits are delivered and how they can better be delivered. And this is where we really do need to engage Canadians, and I think that's what's missing from the discussion, Mr. Speaker. The fact that decisions are made, we design legislation without really doing the proper consultation with Canadians who will be impacted by this, and no one really knows whether or not they will be impacted by it. So I think it's really important to recognize, as members of Parliament, our constituents who are out there who may be working today but who may lose their job through no fault of their own. And I think that is what is missing here, is that consultation, is that discussion with Canadians about the EI system and how it can best be administered to deliver for Canadians in the way in which it should be delivered. One area where benefits need to look at is sickness benefits. And we really need to look at this aspect of EI. Currently, those who are eligible for sickness benefits are entitled to up to 15 weeks of benefits if they are unable to work because of their illness. Unfortunately, many Canadians who are sick are forced to refrain from going back to work long after their benefits expire. For example, a woman diagnosed with breast cancer who is forced to take leave from work so that she may undergo treatment will face a grueling treatment regime that is often longer than the 15 weeks allowed for by the current regulation, leaving her stranded, unable to work while receiving treatment, and unable to access more EI benefits, even though her sickness has left her in a difficult position. In this case, the goal to provide support while she is receiving treatment is not being met fully. Clearly, in a situation like this and in other similar situations, Mr. Speaker, there is a gap in the program delivery. How do you explain to someone who's in that situation that we really can't respond in the way that we should when we know you're going through a difficult time? It's a program that you've paid into, but we're not there to meet your needs. More generally, but equally important to this conversation, Statistics Canada reports that from 2010 to 2011, the most recent dates available, access to EI benefits was at its lowest level in nearly a decade. According to Statistics Canada, one reason for the decreasing access to EI benefits was a lack of available full-time jobs. Although all employees pay into the EI fund, only those with a certain number of hours worked can access the benefits which they pay. That is one of the many reasons why Canada needs a government that spends less on political advertising and actually does more to create the desperately needed full-time jobs that far too many Canadian families are struggling to find. Instead of focusing on creating full-time jobs, this government hiked the employment insurance rate on job creators, essentially raising a direct tax on employment. Not to mention the Conservative government's declaration of war through its changes to the EI system on many of my constituents who are without a job through no fault of their own. And you will find this in a lot of rural areas, Mr. Speaker, that while people want to work, unfortunately, full-time jobs aren't available. Furthermore, with 14 million phone calls from Canadians trying to access their benefits, automatically hung up on by Service Canada, who don't have the resources to respond, Mr. Speaker, we're finding that they are not getting the services that they need.
Questions and comments?